Welcome, everybody, to Let's Talk About Pools today. And today's episode is going to be with podcast guest Richard Kauffman, and we're going to be discussing childhood drowning and prevention. A wonderful topic that I know a lot of our Parks and Rec group will like to listen to, but also any of our pool companies. We all have a responsibility in childhood drowning prevention. So I hope you enjoy my summer series in the podcast. This is the start of those episodes on childhood drowning and prevention. So I hope you all enjoy. And I also want to throw out there, thank you, Skimmer, for being a continued sponsor of the podcast. So today's sponsor is Skimmer. Please listen in to them, and then the episode will be directly after. Thank you so much, guys, and enjoy.
This is Skimmer, software for the modern pool professional. What can you do with Skimmer? See all your customers on a map, build service routes quickly, and let Skimmer optimize them for you. Access customer information, including contact details and full service history, anytime and anywhere. Customize work orders to track jobs like repairs and filter cleanings. Email your customers when you complete a service. You can include service details and on-site photos. Does your customer need a part? Add it to the shopping list and track it from purchase to installation. Skimmer will even remind you what parts you need for the day, and you can mark them as installed right when you're finished. Skimmer doesn't just store your service history. It helps you get paid. We integrate with QuickBooks Online for fast, easy invoicing. And we've got more billing options coming soon. All that's just the beginning. Go to getskimmer.com to watch our demo video, check out our online tutorials, and see if Skimmer is right for you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my podcast today. Let's talk about pools. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about childhood drowning and childhood drowning prevention. Because the leading cause of death for children's ages 1 to 4 is childhood drowning. So my guest today that I've been looking so forward to having is Richard Kauffman with the Kels Group. And he also has his own podcast called The Drowning Warriors. Welcome today, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing really good. It's middle of winter, cold, but I know you're in Florida. It's much warmer. And I would like to be there too.
So tell me about a little bit about yourself and your company and your podcasts and stuff like that.
Well, it's a really long story, so we don't want to take up the whole podcast here and tell you my whole story. But I've been pretty much an independent business person all my life in one way or the other in multiple different areas and genres and things like that. But my story and my journey really started back in 1993. We had a house. I had a backyard swimming pool. Young family. I had two daughters. One was 8 and one was 3. And did everything right as far as what we believed was right around the pool. I had a daughter. They were going to the local community pool here in town for swim lessons, our oldest daughter. And I wanted my younger daughter to go to swim lessons. They told us that the American Red Cross standard was she had to be 5 years old, is what we were told then. And so she couldn't be involved in swim lessons. And so we went through the first summer, no issues, no problems. We did all the right things. We thought what was right. One of the things was we put those little blow up arm floaties on her arms. That way she could float. We thought she was swimming. That's what most parents think. Oh, look, my child is swimming. Look at them move around the pool. But they're really not. They're just moving around the pool. And the floaties are what's keeping them afloat. But that's what we thought was the right thing to do. Then the next year came around, pools opened, and our daughter wanted to be at the pool one day. And so I took her because her older sister was there for swim lessons. Once swim lessons ended, within 45 minutes later, I received a phone call that they found her unresponsive in the pool. And she never did gain consciousness, and she died due to her drowning that day, 8 feet in front of a lifeguard. While there was over some people there, and not a soul saw anything happen, and she was in care of a babysitter. And so that's what really is the catalyst that started this journey. We had a nonprofit in the beginning for several years. Then consequently, my marriage ended. And so when that ended, so did the nonprofit. And so we had to dissolve that. And then from there, I kind of just drifted all over the place. And for those parents that might be listening to this, and whether or not it's a loss of a child to a drowning or any child that's lost, I think they can relate to what a parent may go through as far as being lost in this big world that we're in, and trying to refine yourself, refine your focus, or find your mission in life, whatever that was. And I just felt like something was missing, and went for years. And basically, I self-sabotaged myself for years after my marriage ended because I blamed myself. I blamed myself for my daughter's drowning. Number one, I was a father, and a father's job is to protect their children. And I failed. I failed at that. I then failed in my marriage. So I really felt worthless. I didn't really feel like anything. So I blew up a couple businesses. I just, really struggled. And I kept trying to find, I was being tugged to come back to the water safety. There was a story here. Dabbled a little bit with some writing, did a couple different blogs over the years. And then it was about 4 years ago, we started reaching out to a lot of people within the water safety community with the advent of the internet, Facebook, all these different social media channels. It made it very, very easy to begin to connect with other people like myself, other families who lost children. And I found that, there's a network of people out there in communities. And one of the communities was the NDPA, which is the National Drowning Prevention Alliance.
Yep.
Which is governed by Families United, which is Families United to Prevent Drowning. And they're families who have basically are walking in my shoes, and I'm walking in their shoes, each one of them with a different story. And it really hit me when I began listening to so many of these stories, and then I started reaching out. I really saw there was a huge, huge need for, number one, education. Number two, to learn to swim. And number three is just don't take anything for granted when it comes to your children's safety, especially if you have your own pool and you think as a parent, we always believe we're doing the right thing. And we never want anybody to tell us that what we're doing as a parent is wrong. Okay. I think when other parents criticize other parents on how they raise their children, parents get very, very defensive. And I began looking at this from a question standpoint. And I said to myself, that day that I took my daughter to the pool, and I wanted her to have swim lessons, what could those people, the swim instructors, say to me that would have caused me to make a different decision, even if they couldn't teach my child? Because there was infant swim, ISR, all that was around in 1993. Mind you, we're in 2021 now. So this is almost, this is 28 years ago. And there was, ISR, there was infant swimming, and all these things were around then. We didn't know it, never heard of it. I'm sure, I can't say whether or not these instructors knew about it, but if they did, I felt like they had a responsibility to tell me. So we can't teach your daughter because, we don't start kids until they're 5. If that's their rule, I get it. I understand. I don't agree with it, but, but at that time, I just thought that was the norm. That's just the way things are. And, so we just go about our normal day of business. And so I felt like they had a fiduciary duty to tell me this. And so I started talking to other people and families and finding out that children drown not because a parent, it's easy to sit here and say that parent was not paying attention. The babysitter was not paying attention. A lifeguard was not paying attention. Children drown because they don't understand the risks. They don't know what to look for. They don't, they just think that other people will see. And then the other thing is, drowning does not look like we see it in the movies. And you have to understand.
Exactly.
So that's really kind of what brings me to here. And I've interviewed thousands of people. on and off my podcast and traveled the country and talked to people, companies and businesses. And I really feel that, there has to be some type of uniform message. There has to be something that, in other words, what will the parents listen to? And when I ask that question, what can somebody, say a swimming instructor or a swim school, what could they say to me that would get my attention? Now, one of the stats is drowning is the leading cause of accidental death to children between the ages of 1 to 4. Now that's a stat. When you hear the stat, it's like, oh my gosh. But you know what? If I was a parent that didn't quite understand everything there was about, the dangers of drowning, that stat, I think I would say, oh, well, that's really bad, but I'm a good parent. That's not going to happen to me. I'm going to watch my child. Because our intentions are exactly that. I'm going to watch my child. I'm going to do these things. And so I don't believe the stat will motivate parents. It might motivate some, but it's not going to motivate the masses to take the action necessary to make their backyard pool safe, because pools are very cheap to get now. You can go to Walmart for less than $500, have a 3 to 4 foot pool in your backyard. And
that they can drown in.
Oh yeah. Because what is it? 1 inch or less than 2 inches of water, a child can drown. And I was working with some attorneys and talking to a few other people up in Michigan. There was a little girl. It was in the springtime. This was about 3-4 years ago. And there was a 2-year-old little girl got in the backyard. So in Michigan, we had a really rainy spring with all the snow melt. If you ever step in mud, have you ever, at the beach, even in sand, so if when that sand or mud is wet, it's like a suction. Mm-hmm. This little girl couldn't get her feet. She was standing in a mud puddle in her backyard and her feet got stuck in the mud.
Wow.
She put her feet out. She fell forward face down and she drowned in less than 2 inches in a backyard puddle.
I know it happens in it's bathtub. The statistic isn't just swimming pools. I think it's bathtubs. If a kid drowns in a lake or a canal or anything like that, I think they throw drowning into any type of body of water or any water that they actually died of drowning in.
Right. Yeah, because you have to understand what drowning really is. It's the lack of oxygen. I mean, you're essentially it's just that the water is what's you could suffocate and on land, you get stuck in a corn bin or underground under dirt, and essentially it's kind of the same thing. It's the lack of oxygen to the brain, and you go to sleep and you die. And drowning is kind of the same thing. It's the lack of oxygen, and so it's just that you're drowning in water, and it's probably it's 100% preventable. That's the thing. It's 100% preventable. It's one of the few accidental deaths that I believe is, does not have to happen. And when you look at automobile safety, when it deals with children and accidental deaths, you have this government infrastructure there that has put all these safety standards in place with the automobile makers and the seat belts and everything. There is car seats, baby car seats, everything that there is. Parents take their children's car safety much more important than they do their backyard pool safety. But
totally agree with that.
When you have a pool or a child is around, and let's say that's the same thing with gun safety. Okay, parents have their guns, most parents, I think, have their guns locked up, trigger locks on them, safe, keep their ammunition separate to the guns so it's not accessible. But what people don't understand is when they have a backyard pool and there's water in that pool, even if it's emptied and it rains, there's water in that pool. That pool is locked and loaded. It's like a locked and loaded gun waiting for your child to step in, and it's there. It's essentially a death trap. And I think if parents understand that, then they will begin to maybe take the message as far as water safety as important as, say, car safety, gun safety. Because in 1993, when my daughter drowned, there's been approximately 1,000 children drown every year due to childhood drowning. That number has not changed. Okay, sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less, but that number has not really changed since 1993 and before. We're still, you go to the CDC stats and it still says, roughly 1,000 children a year drown, here in the United States. And so that stats, is there. But you look at car safety. In 1993, it was something like 1,600 children drowned or died in a car accident below the age of 16. That number's been cut down to less than 600.
Well, and I totally agree with you, like relating the car thing. Like I've had kids, and the last one I had just 4 years ago. And the thing they check before you even leave, he was in the NICU, but the thing they had to check before the baby can even leave the hospital is that you have an approved car seat and that your child is going to fit in it and it's properly secure in your car before you leave the hospital. But you don't receive any information about, do you have a pool? They don't even ask, do you have a pool in your backyard? I know it's not going to happen when they're an infant, but you don't get that information about the potential drowning hazard that you might have in your backyard or even at a family member's house or anything like that. I didn't get anything about that. I never got anything either when all those trips I make to the pediatrician office. I didn't get any information that even made me think or even have that, water or drowning on the radar for me to even think about as a parent. Yes, they go overboard with the car seat and car safety and what age they have to wear, be in what car seat and what age they still have to wear a seatbelt. And, you get a lot of that. I totally agree with you.
Right. Well, for example, I know when our children are born and my oldest is like 36, 37 now. And we were told about bathing safety, how to, make sure your child's safe when you're bathing and put them like on a sponge in a bathtub and you only have maybe this much water and we bathed them in a bucket in the sink, it's like, whatever, you could do, sponge baths and stuff like that. That's about, and I probably for the most part, it's probably pretty much the same today. When it comes to water safety, as far as what new parents are subjected to, but because of the conversations that you and I are having and other people's, the NDPA and some of those organizations, and they're with the United States Swim School Association, the ITSPA, and several of these other organizations that talk about drowning safety, there are, the pediatricians are starting to take notice, but there's still this divide in the community as far as doctors and pediatricians. Some see the importance and do it. Some say we already are mandated to hand out so much stuff. But here's where I believe part of the problem is. What some of these pediatricians are doing, and I don't have one here, is they hand a pamphlet. So you got a pamphlet on this, you got a pamphlet on breastfeeding, you got a pamphlet on how to swaddle your baby and put them in the baby crib, because when we've, like I said, we've got seven kids. And so, at first it was like put the baby on its belly, then it had to be on its side with a blanket, then it had to be on their back. I mean, those things have changed over the years. Now it's back to the belly or back to the side because, the baby could spit up and choke and aspirate on their own, vomit or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, they're trying to, so the industry, even when it comes to baby safety, they're still trying to figure it out. We've been having babies since the beginning of time. Okay. And we're still trying to figure out what is the best way to put the child to bed. So it's the same thing in the water safety community. For the most part, we're still trying to figure it out. We know how it happens, but how do we educate the people? And the problem is when you give a boatload of pamphlets to a new parent, how many of them are going to pull out a piece of paper that's going to explain water safety? They've got so many other things on their mind. So the pediatricians, if they're relying on the pamphlets, a very small percentage of people, then, and I'm sure you've been to home shows and different types of conventions and things, and you come home with so many pamphlets. How many of them do you actually look at? And that becomes a problem. The same thing. So from a new parent standpoint, they're only going to pay attention to the information that they need to know right now, this very moment. But other than that, they're going to rely on their friends and family to instruct them on how to raise their child. And then the next thing you know, they go to a friend's house. There was a pool party. They go to the beach. They get on a boat. We have a pontoon boat. We go up to a local lake because we have a lake house, and we'll go to the marina, or we'll dock someplace, and literally the boat next to me's got 2 infant babies with no life jacket. Now, granted, they're at the dock,
Wow.
but if they only knew how many parents trip and fall, drop their baby, the baby goes in. This is a, kind of a shallow, murky lake. So when there are a lot of boats, it stirs up a lot of the bottom. You go about an inch underwater, you don't see nothing. And so a baby goes under, good luck in trying to find them. You might get lucky. But that's so it's just plain ignorance. People think that they can hold on to their baby, and that as long as I have a hold of that baby, the baby's safe. But what is if we fall or something happens, it is a knee-jerk reaction to brace yourself. Now, you might hold the baby one hand and try to spin or land on your back or something, but intentions are good. Daily practices and lifestyle when it comes to water safety are bad. People just don't understand. And the problem is, I can sit here as a parent, is why didn't anybody tell me this? The people, the doctors, the swim instructors, that swim instructor could have told me, said, Mr. Kauffman, if you would, it's important that your child learn to swim. So we can't teach her until she's age 5, but you know what? You need to be present, because you can't rely on our lifeguards to babysit your child. You need to be present. And anytime your daughter's in the water, you need to be in the water with her. And then that might have stopped me in my tracks enough just for 30 seconds to say, and ask the person, why is that? Then the person could say, well, here's why. Now that decision is on me. So if I send my daughter and she drowns, now it really is my fault. That's the way I see it. And now I took blame for it, but I also took blame. I blame myself for not knowing the dangers, not because if I would have been educated or at least had the information, I could have made different decisions that could have changed the outcome in the course of the future. And that in its nutshell is how you and I are here today talking.
The big thing is, don't ever be in the water by yourself. Don't ever be in the pool area by yourself. And it doesn't matter if it's just a child. It would even come down if you're an adult. If you are in your backyard pool and there's nobody there and you're by yourself and you're in the water and you have a heart attack, you might drown.
Right.
There's nobody there to fish you out. You're not going to die from the heart attack. You're going to die from drowning because you had a heart attack, which put you under.
Right.
And you couldn't get up. So people always think of drowning because of the drowning rates and thinking about just the kids. But this really comes down, that same principle comes down to adults as well. It's always been the education I've been hearing out there now is don't swim alone.
Right.
So if your kid's going to be in the pool area, even if they're not in the water yet, you should have an adult out there, right?
Right.
It's going to be in charge of the water safety, making sure that they don't trip and fall into the pool, because we all know kids love to run around the pool deck and run around the pool. And I know mine always did. And we always yell at them as soon there's no running when you're out in the pool area.
Right. Well, you mentioned, even adults drown. The statistic and the number of I'm not sure if they have the exact percentage, but it's about 2/3. 2/3 or roughly 60+% of the people who drown know how to swim. I've interviewed Olympic gold medalists on my podcast who have had situations where they would have drowned. They've cramped. They go on long swims and swim around Manhattan and do all these big, huge marathon swims. And they find themselves, and when a person drowns, and I think, you and I were talking a little bit before the podcast. One of the things is we talk about fear. When fear sets in, the fear can set into the most accomplished swimmer when they're in a panic situation. All common sense goes out the mind. So you're in Florida, riptides. Every year, riptides claim hundreds of people who know how to swim. The problem is when they get caught in one, they probably know what to do before they get in the water. But once they get in that situation, they panic. And when they panic, they do the wrong thing. My daughter, I'm sure she panicked when she got in the water. We don't know how she got in. We don't know if she climbed in her own, but we had our own pool and she did not have a fear of the water. That much I do know. And she didn't have a fear because she always had, these little blow up water wings. And that pool, it was a public pool, and they would not let children have blow up water wings or any flotation devices. And, for probably good reason. Nobody explained that to me. Why is that? Well, maybe they believe that is not a swimming aid, because blow up water wings, any type, puddle jumpers, all those things do injustice or an inservice to your children. As a parent, we see that as security. Yep. Because now I can get on my phone. And I can sit here and text and talk to my friends because my child has a puddle jumper on.
False sense of security.
Yeah, it becomes a false sense of security, and the child does not understand why, or that is what's keeping them afloat. There's so many parents out there that I've talked to that are part of this drowning community that can tell you stories of, my child took the puddle jumper off to go over to the picnic table to eat lunch. 15 minutes later, I look at the chair, the child's not there. Then the parent goes and looks all over the swimming grounds, goes in the house or they're at a park or wherever they're at. They go look every place except for the pool or the body of water. And once you know, that's where the child is at. Child's done eating. What do they want to do? They want to go back and swim with their friends.
Yep.
Then they walk away without the puddle jumper, without the life vest, without anything. And so, and if a parent believes, if they believe that will keep their child safe, they are wrong. It keeps them safe, to an extent until they learn to swim. But, the percentages are in your favor that you'll be successful and they'll learn to swim. But you know what? It's the same thing. It's a loaded gun. It's a loaded gun waiting to go off. Why take the calculated risk? I play the stock market. I play different things, and I take risk every day with money. But you know what? Money can be replaced. I can replace everything. I can lose my house. I can lose everything I can replace. But you know what? I take a calculated risk with my child, and I lose. It's gone forever. Yep. Cannot be replaced.
It becomes a trauma in your life. It's personal.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how big the statistic is to people, or if it's not a big statistic to them when it happens to you.
Right. And I could sit here and show pictures of my daughter, and I can make people. I literally have spoken public at conventions and shows and different things. Like, I can bring an audience to tears because they've not walked in my shoes. But I don't see how that serves a purpose, because I can stand there and talk to a group of families, and I'll throw out that stat that drowning is the leading cause of unintentional death to children under the ages of 5 years of age. It's the second leading cause to children from 6 to 15 years of age. And so, and I can sit there and look at the parents, and I can see their faces, and 50% of them will turn off. They'll turn off and walk away because they believe it won't happen to them. And so, I tell my daughter's story, but I'm not here really to tell her story, because the story is more about what I didn't know, and that your life could be my life. Okay.
Well, and you've taken what has happened and turned it into a very positive thing to help other parents. Mm-hmm. on the educational side, so that they will know what you didn't know. Right. What should they be looking for?
Right. And we were talking about fear, like, and I mentioned this earlier. And I think the reason why parents turn off when they hear those stats and they hear about things like that, it's a natural behavior that if it scares me, I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to listen to it because it involves my child, and I can't go there. I can't go there because I can't fathom having to go to my child's funeral and putting them 6 feet under the ground. I can't, I just can't mentally put myself in that place. That's why I say, what can we say as a community? What can we say as swim instructors, as anybody out there? What can we say to a parent? Because when we speak to them from that standpoint, and we want to, and we think it's like the reality shows. What is it? Scared Straight. You take teenage kids, take them to jail, and you scare the living bejesus out of them, right? And maybe they'll change their behavior. Well, you take a parent and you want to scare the bejesus out of them. But when it comes to drowning, you're going to lose 80 to 90% of them because they won't go there. And so I believe the message has to change. I don't know what the message is. I've played with a few messages. One of them is can't swim, don't go in. And because it's real simple. You don't want to die in a car accident, don't get in a car. A lot of people have fear of flying. Why do they not get on an airplane? Because they think it's going to fall out of the sky and they're going to die. So they don't fly. So it's real simple. You don't want to drown, don't get in the water. The biggest thing, we're talking about the automotive industry and the numbers of deaths. 100% of the people get in a car. What's the percentage of people that get in the water? And there's more children that drown today than die in a car accident. And so why is that? A lot of it's the education standpoint. Kids are learning about car safety and car seats. They spend time educating them about, the car seats. We've went over all that. And so we just don't do the same thing when it comes to water safety. And it's just as dangerous as putting your kid in the backseat of the car. Here's the thing. If you're driving down the interstate or driving down the road and you see a kid in a car next to you, not in a car seat, kind of like the way you and I probably grew up, sitting in the back window and bouncing all over the place and sitting on dad's lap, driving the car, going 70 miles an hour down the interstate. Not a thought that, we hit the brakes, the kid's going to go flying right through the windshield. But we've changed that behavior. We realize that's dangerous. But when we see, as a parent, when we see a child not in a car seat, we become outraged. We become upset. We think that is a bad parent. We think that person should probably have the child take away for child endangerment. But you know what? We see parents on cell phones not paying attention to the children in the water. Why do we not have the same outrage?
And I was going to ask about and bring that into the conversation. Now that we have cell phones, a lot more, almost all of us have one now. How is that affecting the, childhood drowning with parents being on cell phones?
Well, here's the one thing, and I've seen fire departments and lifeguards and stuff go through a beach and pools, and they'll take their phones away from, they'll literally take phones away from people because they're not, it's a distraction. Just look at texting and driving. It's a distraction. But again, we can also look at the texting and driving situation and say it's a false sense of security. I've done it, and probably I'll do it again because I don't believe I'll get in a car accident. And that's, and then sometimes I'll catch myself and say, oh, I'm in traffic. I don't want to be stopped. Or I'll stop at a stop sign, send a quick text message. I do more of that today because I don't want to be this person preaching water safety and saying, hey, cell phones are a distraction, but then I'm in a car, I'm doing something else, doing the same thing. I'm asking parents not to do at a swimming pool. Okay. So, we don't want to be, but we're all guilty of that. And the only thing I will say about this is going back to 1993, there was cell phones back then. I had one. It was a big bag phone. I mean, really big, expensive thing. Not like we have today, but the babysitter that was watching my daughter that day, she was reading a book. So, from the standpoint, if you look at, say, okay, well, cell phones is a big problem. We take the cell phone away. What are people going to do? People want to entertain themselves, so they might read a book. They might do other things that's going to take their attention away because we haven't really talked about why it's important to watch your child. So if I take a cell phone away and I don't educate somebody about why I don't want you on a cell phone, and I say, hey, you need to be paying attention to your kid, they'll think, I can do this. I'm going to look down at my phone just for a split second. I'm going to answer, what's for dinner, or something like that, or getting ready to leave here in 5 minutes when little Johnny gets out of the water. And next thing you know, you lose track of little Johnny. And he was over there bobbing up and down in the water. All of a sudden he's not. Oh, he's just swimming underwater. Lifeguards up there, they'll take care of my child. Next thing you know, you hear the whistle blow. They're dragging little Johnny out, starting to do CPR.
So it definitely sounds from the message that, education seems to be the key thing here. For somehow to get that education out to the parents on the multitude of things that is important for water safety. There's more than one thing that we could talk about in this podcast when we talk about water safety, but I totally agree. I think that messages are getting out there specifically with, drinking and driving. Don't get behind the wheel if you drink, because you might kill somebody else's family member. It's a safety thing again. So most people choose not to do it.
Right.
The child safety seat in the car. That's another one. Texting and driving and talking on a cell phone while driving. That's becoming a big thing now too, just as much as drinking and driving. The education piece has gotten out there. You see the signs on the side of the roads. The people are viewing it now where if you're sitting in a car with somebody next to you, they view it in a negative way because they've been educated in some way that this is not safe. But still to this day, we still don't see a lot of education for water safety. I agree with that. And why is that? It doesn't make any sense when it's the statistic is there, but when you just give a statistic to a parent, it either doesn't mean anything to them, or most of the time it would be they don't understand what the statistic actually means. Mm-hmm. Rather than it being the other reason.
Right.
So, I think that's why it tends to be ignored, because if they don't understand it, then the education doesn't happen because of that lack of understanding.
Exactly. No, and when it comes to statistics, there are some people that feed off of that and they will take that under advisement and they'll do the right thing. But for the majority of people, I don't, you could give me all the statistics when it comes to child safety. If I, as a parent, believe that they will not happen to me, I won't do anything about it. And that's where we have to, have a little humility and understand that we are human. We make mistakes every single day. We make mistakes with our children. The difference is nothing happens. And so yeah, go ahead.
With drowning, you had said it earlier, and so the audience, if they're new to this whole topic and listening, drowning is not like what we see in the movies. Am I correct?
You are 100% correct.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that for our audience so that they can understand what it actually is?
Well, first off, drowning takes place under the water. In the movies, what do they show in the movies? Somebody up the top of the water, flailing their arms and trying to stay afloat. I'm not sitting here saying that may not happen, but typically what happens is the person at that point in time, they're struggling, if that even happens. But when it comes to a child, that never takes place. I mean, if it does, if somebody says it does, show me the proof. Show me the video. Show me something. Because you could go on YouTube right now, search child drownings, and you'll find video after video after video. It's security cameras and motels and everything else. You'll see the kid, plop right in the water. Never once. Right 5 feet away from an adult, and that adult never knows. You could see the child underwater. So when my daughter drowned, there was people that told us that we saw her in the water. We just thought she was swimming. She was in the adult pool. She got from the little kiddie pool to the adult pool. And so, that's what happens. And so drowning takes place under the water. We need to understand that. And don't think that you can sit here 40 feet over there on your cell phone, reading a book, talking to your best friends, planning, the birthday party or whatever it is, and think you can watch, little Johnny or little Susie from 40 feet away, and then turn around. We have another false sense of security. We believe if I'm not watching my child, somebody else is. That's the other mistake. You're the parent. It's your responsibility. Don't trust big brother, big sister, some stranger in the pool, the lifeguard. Okay. The lifeguard is there as a last ditch safety measure. And it's not 100% effective. They're human too. They make mistakes. Sometimes they don't even see. My daughter drowned 8 feet in front of a lifeguard. Never saw her. Explain, have somebody within the lifeguard community explain that to me. And they can't. I mean, they could give you these things. Well, could have been, blindness, reflection of the water, the waves, could have been, the point of it is even trained lifeguards don't know what drowning looks like, and they can't recognize it, or they haven't been trained. And so, I'm not a trained professional, and I'm the last person that's going to sit here and tell a lifeguard how to do their job. Number one, I give them kudos because I wouldn't want that job with the responsibility of a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. I would not want that job. I mean, knowing what I know now and the risks that, of just how dangerous it is, not from a lifeguard standpoint, but the gravity and what the weight that's on your shoulders for that person's safety in front of you. The majority of lifeguards, they make rescues. Most of them turn out great, but there are ones but when that person drowns, here's a real important thing to understand. The drowning just doesn't happen to the person or the child that drowns. It happens to the family. But it happened, that lifeguard that was there that day, I don't know whatever happened to him, but you know what? He has to live with, he made a mistake. It was he was 16 years old, his first day on the job. First day. And so it happens. That's stuck with him the rest of his life. All the 200 people, when I started my podcast, I had people reach out to me that heard my podcast and say, I was there, they're in their 30s. And they say, I was 12 years old that day. I was there at that pool. And they've told me stories I've never heard. What happened that we didn't have that information at the time. And so, and they were there that day at 12 years old. Now they have children, teenage children, adult children, grandchildren. And that event that day has caused them to change how they live their life around water. Because
and that's the most powerful thing that you can do, Richard, with your podcast and what you've been doing in your life is you've taken something that's very personal for you, something that was traumatic, instead of letting it consume you in a negative way, you've turned it into something positive that has probably touched and helped a lot of other families and parents, not just that have suffered the same traumatic thing that happened to you, but you've probably helped other parents when they've listened to the podcast and their child didn't drown. And I think that's more about what you want than to sit into the negativity of what had happened, the trauma that happened, which definitely not downplaying. But you have moved forward, and I'm sure you have touched many parents and you've helped them out there. And I hope that this podcast episode here will as well. Maybe one person. It only takes you getting one person that's listening, Richard, and you've helped somebody. What happened to you and your family and what happened to your daughter, hopefully you've prevented it from happening to one person or more than one person, I'm sure.
All I can say is I've had people reach out for me all over the world. We have a huge listenership in Australia, Southeast Asia, different places. I had one lady was listening to a podcast. She was traveling in Canada. She pulled over and had to send me a message because the podcast that she was listening to affected her. And she was a swim instructor, and she pulled over. you know, and I don't remember exactly what episode it was, but I've received messages from this, and this is the thing that, you know, that you have a particular listenership, and you have people, and you are a professional in this community, and so you have a voice, you have a platform, and then there's people that are listening to you, and we need hundreds of these podcasts, not just the handful.
I agree.
Competition is good, but we each have our own story. We each have our own little niche of people. You know, there's what is it? Some odd 1.5 billion people on Facebook. How can we get a message in front of every person every day about water safety on somebody's news feed in Facebook? That should be our goal. I mean, you could do that. You know, you'll start to reach a lot of people, and then maybe at least give people the avenue to stop them in their tracks for 30 seconds to allow them to reconsider before going down the river on a canoe without a child's life jacket on, or, you know, getting on a boat, or going to the beach, or, you know, or letting them go with their friends and not question what they're going to do about water safety. And that, you know, trusting that family. You know, you might be a parent that says, hey, I take my water safety, pool safety, everything. We have every thing known to man that we can do to keep our child safe. But then I let Johnny or Susie go with, you know, my best friend, with their best friend's family, to the beach or to a lake or to a pool. And I expect them to know what I know.
Yeah.
They don't. And they don't, and they won't. I have my own children and my own nieces and nephews. Even my own grandchildren, the kids wear puddle jumpers. And I approached our children about water safety. They just look at me and say, you know, they all came after Kelsey drowned, but you know, they just say, well, Dad, you're just paranoid. You know, you taught us well. We know what to look for. If I taught you well, then why is my 2-year-old grandson not in swim lessons? You know, and don't give me the excuse, well, there's nobody around here because we live in a rural country. You know, I have to drive 40 miles to find an instructor that'll teach my child to float in the water. You know, it goes back to, what are we willing to do to take risk on? We'll risk so much stuff, and we don't understand. I could lose my job today, and I can replace that tomorrow. I can lose everything. I could, you know, be destitute under a bridge for 6 months. Guess what? I could be 6 months later, I could be back on top of the world again.
You can't replace the child that drowned.
Right. And that's just not drowning. You can't replace. Something happens, you know, to one of your loved ones, regardless how it happens, it's over. It's over. Mm-hmm. Now you can sit here and second guess every decision you made up to that point. And you'd say, why didn't I know? And that's every parent that I've talked to and interviewed that have lost a child to a drowning. They say, why didn't I know? I don't have an answer for them, other than I can sit here and blame the water safety community or the swimming community and say they didn't do their job. That's a tough, stark reality. But the responsibility has to rest on somebody's shoulders. You know, we're real quick to blame other people and other organizations. And then we want the government we don't want government involved in our life, but then we want government legislation to tell these people how to run, what age our children should start swimming and do all these things, and which are all good things. I mean, I don't have a problem when it's legislation to put laws in force to make things safer, because that's why we have those things, because we've learned. I mean, all the warning signs on ladders and everything, car seats and everything that we've learned those because of previous accidents. But when it comes to water safety, why aren't we taking the same precautions because of previous accidents? It's like, oh, that's nothing. 1,000 children, nothing. 4,000 people. There's, 350,000 people worldwide drowned every year. Those are the ones that we know of. And here's the thing that most people don't understand when they think of drowning. They think, well, 1,000 children. In order to be classified as a drowning victim, you better die today. Because if your child goes to the hospital and they put on a respirator and they live 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and then the parent makes a decision after the doctor says your child's brain dead, they're not going to survive. You unplug the respirator and let the child go. That child does not count as a drowning victim. So the numbers are much, much higher than what's actually reported. We need a national trauma base to let people, so in other words, when somebody goes to the hospital and from a billing standpoint, you can't bill the insurance company for a drowning because it's not in the trauma database. It has to be coded as something else. So you better die now. Otherwise, you're not counted in the numbers because the hospital doesn't. So you go to the intensive care, you're admitted to the hospital, but the treatment is for a drowning. And so, but on I need to look at the death certificate. It's been some time, but I believe on my daughter's death certificate, it says something about sophisticated. I can't even say that word, but suffocation due to water or something.
Asphyxiation.
Yeah. And it didn't say cause of death, drowning. The cause of death was, something other, but was brought on because of the drowning. But it also, I believe her organs started shutting down. I mean, her kidneys, liver function, her heart was beating. That's the only thing that was working. I mean, the doctors, after 2.5 hours, they had to make a decision to stop what they were doing because at that point in time, what was going to be left? So I look at things like that and say, I can sit here now and say, it's a blessing in disguise that my daughter didn't survive and be left with that. Now, as a parent, would I want her to survive? Yes. But, it's something that, it was an accident. And, I have forgiven everybody involved. It was an accident. And I've been able to forgive them because even the professionals didn't know. They didn't know the inherent risk because we live in a small community. Never happened. The pool's been there for 60 years. Never had a drowning. Had a few rescues a year, but, other than that, never had a drowning. So that's, that's their false sense of security because they didn't do that. They didn't take their training serious because it's never happened there. They know it happens other places, but just as a parent, it won't happen to me. Pools believe it won't happen to them because, we're doing our training, which many cases is a very structured setting for their training. And so they're being shown what to look for, but what actually happens is not what to look for.
So in summary, for my listeners, I do have Parks and Rec that listen in. I do have pool service companies, and some of these people may be parents as well. So as an overall, what can parents or any of these people in my listenership learn that they could do to make a change or help prevent a child from drowning? What would be some of your key points on things that would help them out here?
Well, first of all, let me speak to you. If you have Parks and Rec people, let me speak to them for a second here. My daughter drowned in a public pool that was operated by a Parks and Recreation. Okay. Parks and Recreation, especially in smaller communities, the swimming pool is usually operated by a park and recreation manager who runs the soccer team, the baseball team. They're not necessarily always trained water safety professionals. Now you get into the bigger cities that have multiple pools and splash pads. They have a designated pool operator or a trained person who that's their only job with the Parks and Recreation. So they go to the trade shows and the conferences and they're educated. And so, that's their full-time job. But the majority of the Parks and Recreations are these little 3-month pools that are operated by a parks manager or an assistant manager who wears many different hats. And so their water safety training is sketchy at best. And so I would say probably every single job. I used to work for a Parks and Recreation. Every job that a Park and Recreation department has, there's inherent risk. You put a kid out on a baseball field, football, soccer field, broken legs, injuries. Heck, they could have a cardiac situation happen or an asthma attack, and they could still die. And but probably the most dangerous thing that a park and recreation has under their umbrella is their swimming pool. But when it comes to the bean counters and the costs and the expenses, that is the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to how they allocate their expenses and how they allocate their finances to the water safety community, because the pool at best is a break-even proposition, or they lose money on it. It's really a service to the community. So when the community is really hot, we have some place to go. And then speaking to the parents, so all those parents who take their kids, pull up to the front door, kick them out of the soccer mom's van, and unloads the whole entire kids' neighborhood at the city pool using the lifeguards as babysitters, and then take off and go to work. That needs to stop. But then they say, well, little Johnny, little Susie, they get upset because they can't go to the pool. Well, you know what? Let them be upset. At least you have your children.
They're still alive.
Yeah. And, and so the other thing too, as a parent, in looking at, say, what I try to do is support those parks and recreation directors and support them by educating the parents so they don't use your pool as a babysitter drop-off, number one. Number two, educate the parents of the importance why it needs to swim. If the Parks and Rec offers swim lessons, make sure that they have trained people, that can start children at the earliest of age to learn to swim, to learn to float, self-rescue. People say, and there's these, and I get these haters and these naysayers, but you'll traumatize the child. Give me a flipping break. I would rather have my child traumatized because their head's in the water and have them alive than have them traumatized and die and then have to live with that the rest of my life because I didn't want to have my child traumatized. Now, you have to do, as a parent, you have to do your dual diligence when it comes to picking the right instructor, because not every instructor is the best for your child in that situation. Yeah, there's some instructors that'll take your little 6-month-old baby and plop right in the water. The kid's going to come up screaming. Yeah, that's probably traumatizing. But then you have instructor, because that's the way they teach. For some that works, for some others it won't. So you have to find that instructor that's going to work with you and with your comfort level and your zone to where they're going to instruct your baby. But the end result is the child will be able to, if they fall in the water, they'll be able to flip over and float. If my daughter could do that, she would be here today. Regardless of the lifeguard, regardless of all that. And so as soon as you can get a child started, and as soon as a Parks and Recreations department can do that, and they need to start here, we're recording this today, like the end of January. Parks and Recreation Department, especially up here in North, they're not thinking pools. They're running basketball leagues. Right now with COVID, they're probably even lucky to be doing anything. But they need to be thinking water safety and water safety education right now and start getting that information into the community's hands. Because as soon as the snow melts, as soon as the weather gets warmer, people are going to go to the pools. Once we start lifting these restrictions of the COVID and everything that we've been living with for just about a year now is going to change. We've all been cooped up.
They're going to flood in. The gates open and they're going to flood in. And then you're going to be dealing with a lot more water safety issues than you would normally have.
So if you're a Parks and Recreation Department person right now listening to this, are you prepared for when that happens?
When the floodgate opens.
Yeah. And so, and then you've taken a whole year where people haven't had water safety instructions, swim lessons instructions, and you take parents that think their thinking is still the same, that you're going to watch my child. And so, we need to take a much more proactive. I've interviewed Parks and Recreations, YMCAs that operate, even in Texas, they start, their pools are open 3 months out of just the summer. You want to know when they start their water safety education? 3 to 5 days before Memorial Day.
Wow.
That's when they start educating people about water safety. That's, they wait till the season. When are people planning their vacations to go to the beach? They're planning them right now.
I plan my vacations about 6 months in advance.
Right. So if I'm going to take my family and go to the beach, by the time you decide to educate me about water safety, I'm already in my car, my boat, my airplane on the way to the water. I've already got my pool ready to open. It might even be open. And up here, it might even have the heater on so I can be in it in April. And so water safety needs to be 365 days a year. It has to be a lifestyle, not just water safety, but safety in general around everything.
Wow, that's a very good
Pool
philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're a 3-month pool, you need to be thinking water safety 365 days a year, because every year your pool opens. But I understand the challenge that they have, because they report and they tell, I call them bean counters, but the people with the city that runs the park and recreation, that really their job is to allocate funds, and usually safety, different things like that, they do. It's just like anything else in the world. Everybody does just enough to get by. And most of these pools it's not the park and recreation director or the pool operators, fault when that happens. It's the people at the top who make the decisions on the money or where the money is being spent. They don't see the importance. We need to educate them too. I mean, you take the Virginia Graham Baker Act, okay, that we have. There's some of the legislation around pools and water safety and gates and fencing and the guards and stuff and the drains and everything. You look at those things, that came about because Baker, who was under President Bush, as a politician, his granddaughter. And so, it had to take something like that for a high-level politician to get involved to change a law that probably has saved hundreds, if not thousands, of children's and people's lives.
Totally agree.
So, and then we could spend all day long here talking this stuff.
We could. It's been you given so much for the listeners to take in, and hopefully you've touched somebody on this podcast episode. And I'd like to thank you so very much for being on my podcast today, Richard.
I appreciate, number one, you asking me to be on the podcast, allow me to share, I'm not a trained professional. It's just, this is just my own personal journey and of talking with professionals like yourself and learning, it's like, I just want to be a sponge. And the more I can learn, the more I can put out there too. And, we have, I think my podcast over the years it's gone out to over 1 million people worldwide. We've been a little bit on a hiatus here for the past 6-7 months because of COVID, and a lot of the places are shut down and trying to reinvent themselves and how they're going to operate. And so, we're just now getting ready to get things geared back up for ourselves here with the Drowning Warriors and the DW Nation and our podcast and what we're doing from our educational standpoint. But, just so my website is thekelsgroup.com. You can go there and find me there. My podcasts are listed there. My contact information is all there. Anybody that would want to, that hears this, that would like any additional information or wants to maybe need some connections with other people in your area, we have a vast, huge network of people all over the country that, used to be a Rolodex. Now it's on my computer. So it's real easy for me to get that and send that to somebody so they could have contacts within their local area or within maybe an hour, 2-hour drive from where they are to have them come into their parks of recreation and speak and do in service for the employees, things like that. And I know Drennan's dream, Bill Mealy, his son drowned. And I know he's got a real big, huge program with the American Red Cross, goes around parks of recreations, telling his story and doing everything there. They do great work. So there's so many others out there that are doing the thankless work every day, unthankful. Most of them, like myself, we're not paid. We don't make a dime doing this. Everything is done with our own penny, or, so, and my daughter's shoes, these are my daughter's shoes. They're on my microphone to remind me. She was 3 years old. That's how big her foot was. And she was 3 years old, drowned 2 weeks before her 4th birthday. And so,
wow, I can relate to that so much, considering I have a 3-year-old that will turn 4 in a month and a half.
Yeah.
So you just hit home with this whole podcast episode. And I think about what could happen to my little guy.
Yeah.
And that I hopefully will learn from listening to you today as well, since I live in a state where we have year-round swimming. So thank you so much for.
Well, one last thing I want to leave your listeners with. I want you to, even if you don't think drowning will happen because you don't go to pools and water, there's water around us all the time. And and when your child is not with you, you have no idea if they're going to be around water. That's the scary thing.
Well, thank you so much today, Richard. I bless you, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. And thank you to all your listeners.